Windows programming is what attracts most people to C++ because the original Windows operating system was written in C, and then later it was changed to C++. Still has a lot of C stuff in there. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes here. But what I wanted to talk to you about here is that if you've come to Visual C++ because you ultimately want to do some Windows programming, I just want to kind of give you a head start on where you need to go next to continue that path. So you're not going to find out that there are three options that you can work with in Microsoft's Visual C++ for creating Windows applications. You can code directly against the Windows API, the Application Programming Interface. You can work with Microsoft Foundation classes, or you can build Windows Forms applications. Now let's talk about all three of these. When you're talking about the Windows API, what you're talking about is simply a group of functions and classes that Microsoft has built that serves as an interface that the Windows OS exposes, that allows you to communicate from your application to the actual underlying Windows operating system. And it causes things to happen. Now what they've done, what Microsoft's nerds have done, is they've basically black boxed functionality in Windows out to these classes and function calls and stuff so that you can interact with the actual Windows operating system. So that's all the API is a bunch of classes and stuff that you can call to manipulate whatever you need to within the operating system. Now all GUI or graphical user interface aspects of your program have to be created totally programmatically. There's no dragging and dropping buttons or text boxes and so forth. Now, obviously that's going to get a lot more complicated. You're going to have to write a lot more lines of code, but you have absolute total control over what's going on. And obviously this is the most powerful and the most complex method of Windows development that you can choose. But if you're really wanting to dig into what's going on with your program and wring every bit of performance out of it, that's the way to go. Now, Microsoft Foundation Classes, or MFC, is another collection of C++ classes that expose the Windows API, but they're less complex than direct Windows API programming because they're doing more work for you. What they're going to accomplish for you is to give you a more graphically based graphical user interface development environment. But to do that, it's kind of thinking for you in the background, if you will. It's going to do some things for you, and so you're losing a little control here from a programmer perspective, but you're gaining a little bit more ease of programming. This is still fairly code intensive, and it's another good place to go. Not quite as much control as Windows API, but a little more control than Windows Forms. Now, Windows Forms development, you're going to find out, is the simplest option for creating Windows applications. It is going to allow you to program in a very familiar environment. Your graphical user interface is constructed simply by assembling a number of controls, and these are those pre-built things like buttons, text boxes, labels. You just drag them onto a form and you're ready to code. All right, so that's what most of us are familiar with, because in most Windows development model, especially for those of you who are new to C++, you're probably coming out of a C# or a VB.NET environment where you've been opening it up and it shows you a form, and then you just drop some buttons and some things on the form and you tie it up with event handler code and so forth in the background based on user action. Okay, so this is probably the place to start. I would suggest Windows Forms programming in C++, and then get very comfortable and just kind of graduate up from there and kind of study and practice your way up. Okay, but that's what you're looking at if you're coming here to ultimately go into Windows programming with C++.